love it when you guys ask questions, and I especially find it very interesting when I learn something and then a couple days later somebody asks me a question or somebody tells me something and I'm like, oh, I just read about that. Do you know that you don't need to buy baking powder? Well, let me explain. So baking powder is a chemical reaction that happens with baking soda and an acid that are combined with some sort of carrier, usually cornstarch, that when it hits the oven and the water, it starts to have a reaction and it puffs up your food. Okay, well, did you know you can make it on your own? So you literally don't even need baking powder. This is one of the things that I am no longer going to be buying, mainly because you need that carrier, the cornstarch, to keep your baking powder and your acid from clumping. But mine always clumps because if you keep it long enough, it will end up clumping. So I'm constantly having to sift out my baking powder, and I'm tired of doing that. So here's what I'm going to be doing from now on. So here's my baking powder, right? I have way more in long-term storage and I'll be using through it. But when I'm done using it, I'm going to be using baking soda and cream of tartar, which is an acid, a dry form of acid that comes from winemaking. So what's the ratio? There are many different people that are saying the ratio between the baking soda and the baking powder. Some say 1:1, some say 1:2, some say 1:3. That's going to be something that we're all going to have to figure out for our own self, what good ratio is for our baking. But isn't it nice knowing that you no longer have to pay the money for baking powder? You no longer have to worry about baking powder going bad because it clumps. Because now you can make it as you need it. I know there are some people that make it and store it in a huge container and they add the cornstarch to it so that it doesn't clump, and then they just use it as baking powder. But you don't have to do that. In my world, the pantry, every space on my pantry shelf is like a gold mine. And there's a scarcity of space. So for me, I'm just gonna take, when it calls for 1 teaspoon of baking powder, I'm gonna take 1.5 teaspoons of baking soda and 1.5 teaspoons of cream of tartar. And there you go. I got baking powder. This is one reason I like TikTok so much, because I'm looking at something going, oh, that would be interesting to look into. And then somebody asks me the question. I'm like, well, I'm going to have to look into that now. And then I look into it and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to save so much money. And I'm not going to have I'm no longer going to have to sift my baking powder. Oh, thank you very much for the comment. And as for rye flour, I grind my rye flour from berries.